So a recent Patreon supporter of mine, and I thank him, by the way, very much for his support, asked me an excellent question, which I thought was worth tackling in a video. He was mentioning that when it comes to subtypes of INFJs, and by now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that there's a few of them. Can there be a bit more flexibility in terms of switching between those subtypes? So for example, rather than having an INFJ, for example, who is compliant, and then maybe later in life experiences a set of events that make them switch to a more solipsistic lifestyle, a more solipsistic relationship to reality, isn't it possible to have more flexibility in the sense of having parts of oneself that may at different parts of the day be more compliant or more solipsistic or more something else, okay? So the illustration he was giving was of an INFJ who may, and I think he was speaking from his own experience, be more compliant in contexts where they feel like they're supported by their peers, like they're doing well, they have this, the tribe is validating what they're doing. So far, so good. But whenever they're experiencing disappointments, failure, bitterness perhaps, or regret, there is a sort of withdrawal into oneself as a defense mechanism that leads to a more solipsistic attitude, which may not last. It may last only until the renewal, the reappearance of external validation and social harmony and approval guide him slowly or quickly back to a more compliant mode of relationship to reality. And it's a very good question, because it's true that in my content, I do speak in rather general terms. You know, I sometimes pride myself on the fact that I particularize the experience of INFJ away from the dead, monolithic categorization of INFJs as this one big thing. But you can never particularize, you know, if you like, the path of particularization never ends. So no matter how much you particularize experience, what you come up with will still remain some form of generalization. So yes, compliant INFJs are a more concrete and particular encapsulation of the INFJ in general, but they are still a generalization. And we cannot avoid speaking in generalization if we are to speak at all, right? We cannot have a language that doesn't have general terms. That's not possible. So I might as well say that these subtypes, which, you know, I would rather call families, are a generalization still, especially when I call them subtypes rather than families, because in a family is implied the notion of particularity over and above family ties, right? So you can have this sense of the general family still respecting the individuality and particularity of each and everyone with their specific traits, and some members of the family will have traits, others will lack them and still be in the family, okay? And so yes, of course, you can have INFJs, and in fact, it's the case for all of us, who alternate, who oscillate between compliance and solipsism. For example, I mean, if I were to look back at the first, say, 30, 35 years of my life, I would say that as far as I'm concerned, I have had a compliant side that's quite noticeable, but the solipsistic side was there too, okay? So we are much more dynamic than any theory can hope to capture. The only way to capture a person in their full dynamism is to just look at them, interact with them, not write about them, not even in fiction or something, or in biography, because even then there's going to be generalizations beyond the existential particularity that the person embodies right there in the moment. So as soon as you start talking about something, in a sense, you kill the thing. You kill, it was Lacan, I think, who said, the word is the death of the thing, right? So meditate for a moment on this aphorism of Lacan, right? Psychoanalyst Lacan. The word is the death of the thing. In other words, as soon as you put something into words, in a metaphorical sense, in a symbolic sense, you kill its particularity, right? So there's no way of avoiding that. But we can always improve ourselves and particularize ourselves further. And so, as our friend was saying, yes, of course, we are, in fact, much more complex, dynamic wholes that have different parts, some of which are more compliant, some of which are more solipsistic, some of which might be more spinning, some of which might be more secure. We are these dynamic, complex wholes. And the idea behind the Jungian concept of individuation is to bring more coherence into this whole, to make the parts fit together as the parts of a real holism, right? Rather than parts that don't really fit together and we don't really know when we're this or when we're that. But even then, as I've mentioned before, spiritualization is a utopian view in many ways. It's a journey, never a destination, never an achievement. So we are never completely unified synthetic wholes, and the parts remain. In fact, we could go even further, and this is very uncomfortable to a lot of people who are interested in personality types, and I'm sure it's going to be uncomfortable even to some of the viewers right now. If we apply this idea to the different families of INFJs, well, we can certainly apply this idea to types themselves, right? So there is this notion that is now quite influential in psychology, but more so in academic psychology. It hasn't really penetrated the mainstream and the more sort of vulgarized literature yet. The notion of the hyperstructure, conceiving of the psychology of a person as a hyperstructure, where there is a dynamic momentum of different parts that have each their different characteristics. So instead of saying this person is psychotic, or this person is obsessional, this person is more hysterical, this person is more phobic, this person is more paranoid, this person is more schizotypal, this person is more perverse, or whatever you want to say. When, a lot of psychologists now speak as, about people as having hyperstructure. So for example, I myself, instead of being a good old neurotic obsessional type, which would be probably the traditional categorization of myself in psychiatric terms, it would make more sense to say that, well, there are parts of me that are more psychotic, there are parts of me that are more neurotic, parts of me that are more perverse, parts of me that are more narcissistic, parts of me that are more borderline. The hyperstructure is this idea. What stops us from saying parts of me are more INFJ, or more such as to fit the description called the INFJ, others more INTP, others more ENFJ, others more whatever. It's very uncomfortable because a lot of the interest that we have in type is predicated upon the unquestioned faith in the unicity of subjectivity, or the fact that subjectivity is this one undivided whole. And once we identify it, we are that, and it's very reassuring to us. But it might not be true, so what do you do with that? Reflect upon it, give me a like, guys. Don't forget you can support me on Patreon. Need you more than ever, guys, so please consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is below. It would help you massively. You can access the Discord server if you become a patron, our beautiful Discord server, as well as the deep dives, my bonus videos every 2-3 weeks, in long form for Patreon supporters only. Don't forget about The Infinite Soul, my book on the INFJ, the latest one on INFJs in the modern world, as well as The Ecstatic Soul, my first book on the INFJ, and to this day, the deepest look into the INFJ mind. Get both those books, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.